Looks like we're going to have a very liberal audience again.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Electoral College, an obstacle to democracy. You decide. So we're going to have a good conversation about
It is an obstacle to democracy.
Get your questions ready because we're going to have questions from you in a little while. A little bit more about myself. I'm a former social studies teacher, and I'm a filmmaker and an electoral reformer. And my current documentary project, Outdated Democracy, a 21st Century Civics Lesson, asks the question, why is it that most Americans don't vote? And then we're also looking at ways that we can make our democracy work better for everyone. So today we want to focus on the Electoral College as perhaps an obstacle to democracy. And we have a wonderful panel, which I'd like to start with the introductions. I'm going to let you know who everyone is, and they're going to tell you a little bit about what they do and their connection to this topic. I should mention that in your program you will see that Dr. Paul Finkelman is listed and he was unable to attend, and also Richard Winger is in a taxi on his way here, and I'm not sure if we're going to be able to hear from Richard or not, but if he comes, we'll work him in. So we're going to start with, we have here to my left, Joe Matthews.
So I'm an editor and read a syndicated California column via a media nonprofit based here in LA called Zocalo Public Square. Some of you may have been to our free public events, which we do many each year. I come at this topic both provincially. My column is about California. The Electoral College probably isn't the biggest beef Californians have with America's sort of 18th century republic, but it connects to probably the biggest beef, the existence of the United States Senate. Every day the Senate is open and for business is a bad day in California. We're sort of mathematically and systematically underrepresented, and to a certain extent because the Electoral College and electors are based on the number of representatives each state has in the Congress, we are posed there as well. And the question really for someone who thinks about state a lot and about the local governments and communities in that state, Zocalo is a place where anyone can write, and very inclusive and is about placing ideas, but the question becomes the tension in the US and in a number of other systems around the world is between the fact that we are democratic at the local level, the state level, in that, in some basic things, including that, the people who win the most votes actually win the elections. That's the concept here in California. It's not the American concept when it comes to sort of selecting a president. And then I come at it also globally. I'm the co-president of a global network, a very large one, that sort of have taken over my life, called the Global Forum on Modern Direct Democracy. And this is an effort to look at direct democracy, meaning initiative, referendum, recall, and other forms of participatory governance, which are really on the rise around the world. We don't have a lot of knowledge and data to compare. So we've built this network over the last 10 years. There's even a guy in an office in Cologne, Germany, who tries to collect data on both the rules and the practices of this and allow us to compare. And certainly in a world where there's rapid democratization, I take issue with the notion that democracy is falling apart around the world. That's a very narrow vision. More people voted in 2016 in the world in elections than ever before in the history of the planet. But the democratization is strongest, again, at the local and state level. And the new forms of democracy and participation we're seeing don't look much like the Electoral College, which looks more and more like an artifact. So I come to that topic in those two ways.
Okay, so at least we know their bias.
Next we have Jennifer Pay, Director of Fair Vote California.
Hey, good afternoon. Oh, thank you. I didn't even say anything yet. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. As Lisa said, my name is Jennifer Pay, and I'm currently the director of Fair Vote California. Fair Vote California is actually only a year old come couple days from now. But we're part of a group called Fair Vote National, and it's been 25 years since the organization started, all on the premise that voters should have greater choice, a stronger voice, and a real democracy that works for everyone. Whether you identify as red, blue, and everywhere in between, we really do need a democracy that works for everyone, and currently it's not working. A piece of that work on the national level is the National Popular Vote, and we support that work in a coalition of a number of different groups. So we want to make sure that the Electoral College system, which is outdated, and you'll learn a little bit more about that and why it's outdated, should really be fixed. So I come here not only as part of Fair Vote, but I've had different hats throughout the last decade or so, working on elections, election reform, on the policy side, and advocacy side, and even organizing in groups that are not currently involved. You know, you've mentioned that we've had the most turnout in just this last election, but we all know only half the country voted. So when we think about what needs to be fixed, there are multiple layers to that. It's partly the participation factor, but it's also the rules, the system. The system itself may be rigged, and we actually may be at a loss of that for that reason.
All right, very good, thank you. Well, we're going to save our special guest for last. I'd like to introduce you to Christine Tobin. She is the founder of Free and Equal Foundation.
I see some familiar faces from this morning panel that Free and Equal, working with Politicon, put together with this guy next to me. That was a lot of fun. I'm the founder of the Free and Equal Elections Foundation, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization whose mission is to broaden electoral choices through education and direct positive action. I've spent over half my life now, it's happened, half my life, 17 years of age, when I saw my dad, he ran for governor in Illinois and was wrongfully knocked off the ballot.
Wow.
And since then, I've devoted over my life helping to get accountable candidates on the ballot from the left, the right, independent, Ds, Rs, Greens, Libertarians, Independents, and even worked as Ralph Nader's National Ballot Access Coordinator in 2008, spearheading over 500,000 signatures
Wow.
to get them on the ballot. I sit here as a visionary, as an organizer, and I am really thankful for Politicon putting on this event. 3 years we've been here now, Free and Equal Elections, and our sponsors, Dr. Bronner's Collective Revolutions. But you know, to what Jen said, Fair Vote is probably one of, if not my favorite organization in the world. In fact, we are here today, a big reason because of Fair Vote, but half the country did not vote. Why? Maybe because we don't have candidates that we are inspired to vote for. Maybe because our system is rigged. We don't have alternative voting methods. Or why don't we have proportional representation? Black box voting, really? Ballot access takes 900,000 signatures just to get on the ballot as an independent for president? This is not okay. So I am excited to learn from some of the experts here. I've known, just gotten to know Lisa and just getting to know everybody here to learn more about the electoral process, of course, but it is time for us to get involved, get engaged more than ever. I think independents are on the rise. I think the party system
Asner's
is
falling
crumbling.
asleep.
I think the stranglehold of the two-party duopoly will and needs to be broken. So thank you so much, Lisa, for putting this on in Politicon, and all the panelists for having me here today. And appreciate your time. Looking forward to our discussion.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. So next we have 8-time Emmy Award-winning actor and activist, Ed Asner.
Yeah, I'm here to add a great deal of glamour to enjoy my glamour. But in actuality, I'm here because I promised to buy her lunch. So don't mind me.
Well, actually, Ed, I was going to start with you to ask you why you're here today and what you think about the Electoral College, and just to talk a little bit more
I'm
about
sure he
your
wants to scrap it.
activism.
I don't want to tell you about it. It's so sexy. But I think the Electoral College should be abolished because we've seen what damage it can perpetrate. and what disappointment it can cause. It's useless.
No, it's not.
Let the people speak and let their
No.
candidates be elected properly and get rid of the goddamn Electoral College, which I believe was created to give Congress a second shot
Yes.
at control of the country.
Now, some of you may understand how the Electoral College works. Some of you may have known at one time and forgotten. Remember, I'm a former social studies teacher. I taught it. I know a lot of my students probably don't remember too much about it today. So let's have a little review. Jennifer, can you sort of run us through how the Electoral College works?
And feel free, folks, to chime in as well. And we do have some mics for later today if you want to come and ask us a question or have a comment to add. So for those of you that may not know, I mean, just looking at the last election, people are paying a little bit more attention than they used to.
Yes.
And we saw this even prior to 2016 with Bush versus Gore. So when we know that the national popular vote may, in actuality, the result turn differently from what the Electoral College result is, that poses a real problem for us, right?
No, it doesn't.
And what we've seen is a real rise in bipartisan support, actually, to whether it be abolish the Electoral College system or actually come up with a new system called the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. And what that means is once we get the 270 Electoral College votes, right now we have 10 states plus DC, so we're about 60% of the way there. When that comes into effect, the Electoral College system essentially will be put to the side, and the National Popular Vote will then come into effect to elect our president. Because currently what we're seeing is these handful of swing states. The last election we saw half of the time of the presidential candidates really spent in only 4 states. What that means is my vote in California is not the same as a vote in Ohio, right? So whether you come from a California blue state, or as I was talking to someone earlier, a voter in Utah, usually known as a red state, what that means we're largely ignored. So
Swing
what we
states
want to
change
make
all
sure
the time.
happens is the presidential campaigns really do have all 50 states come into play, not just
No,
those
they don't.
handful of swing votes.
Very good.
No.
So does anybody out here want to tell us how the Electoral College votes are decided per state? Does anybody remember your civics class?
I know, do.
Yes, sir.
I'll go. Is it on?
I'm not sure, but we...
It just makes it easier so I don't have to compete.
Yeah.
Okay, so how the Electoral College works, each state gets they get votes based on the following: the number of congressional districts, and every state gets 2 for the 2 U.S. senators. So California has 55 because we have 53 congressional reps and 2 U.S. senators, whereas Vermont has 2 U.S. senators but only 1 House rep, so they only have 3.
Right. Great. Thank you so much. That was, everybody get that? That's how we have our electoral votes. That's how it works. So Joe, I want to go to you next and talk a little bit about proportionality and what that means for us here in California specifically, but how it impacts all the states with regard to the Electoral College and that vote allocation.
What do you mean by proportionality? I mean,
Right.
you know, it's winner take all. It's a system with the exception of a couple of places.
Right.
In Nebraska and Maine, I believe.
Yes,
That's
correct.
If you win the vote in that state, you win all the electoral votes. That's not proportional at all. I mean, it's it's a system. It's the best. Maybe it's the best American political science thinking of the 18th century. But you look around the world and you see a place like Germany. Any Germans here? Any Germans at all? You see the best thinking of 20th century American political scientists applied.
And it
when you
was
have
good.
systems that involve proportionality. It's a problem in a large state, the lack of proportionality, like California. California is the size of a good-sized country with many people as Poland. We'd be in the top 20, I think 38th in population if we were a country. We have regions that have the size, character, scale, economy of most American states. But we don't have proportionality in our system. We use the British system of single member districts to elect, and we get some perverse outcomes even in our state as a result of the system. I guess we have the French souffle of the top two, and now here in California, above that British system. And we don't have a proportional system like we should have, which is probably our region should have repeat regional districts, and we should divide people proportionally. So in a proportional system, every vote really counts. And people who are, like people in the Bay Area, has actually a large number of Republicans in terms of number of human beings, not in a percentage of the population. Those folks would have representation in a proportional system if the percentage of the vote you got reflected the percentage of your representation in a legislature or some other body.
Anybody else want to talk about proportionality?
And actually, he touched upon something, winner take all. So let that sink in a little bit. Unfortunately, in our current election systems, whether it's on the national scale, we're looking at president, or even at the local level, take for example here in Los Angeles, the winner-take-all system actually excludes those that may be in the minority and is set up to be essentially for us not to have our votes counted. So as Fair Vote, we support something called ranked choice voting. We also encourage it not just in the single seat, so if you want to elect a mayor, that we make sure that every vote, that if you, say you like someone, number one, but you have a second or third choice, that vote still meaningfully counts. Instead of having to pick the lesser of two evils or have to strategically vote, oh, I really like this person, but they may not actually win. Right? So I think folks may agree with that even in the presidential race, that maybe we supported someone that wasn't on the from the Democratic or Republican Party. So in a single seat, ranked choice voting is what we support, as well as in a multi-seat setting, otherwise known as proportional representation or single transferable vote. I'm seeing eyes glaze over. I know these are very wonky terms, but trust me, it makes for a fair election system where all of our votes are meaningfully cast. And so this is why we support something like the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, as well as seeing it across the state of California in cities and counties as well.
Can you explain ranked choice voting? I didn't mean to interrupt. Could you explain ranked choice voting? Because I don't know. I don't know what it is, essentially.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
So for those of you that are hearing about this for the first time, sometimes it's called ranked choice voting or instant runoff voting. And what that means is you get to vote for your favorite based on preference.
Okay.
So you have the freedom to choose whichever candidates you like, and you're not limited to just one.
Okay.
You can actually rank them. And we can think about it, we can go to the grocery store, we go to the brewery, or the ice cream store. Oh, my favorite is pistachio, but they don't have it today, so I'm going to go with strawberry, right? So if your candidate, your favorite candidate, happens to get last, that's okay, because then your vote gets transferred to your second choice, and so on, if by chance that your candidate actually ends up getting last place each time. But in places like Cambridge, Massachusetts, where they have the multi-seat setting, what we're finding is 95% of the voters get one of their top candidates elected. So that doesn't mean that this whole, the 49% of the electorate gets shut out of the process altogether. You actually have a meaningful say in where your vote is, who you're supporting, and that they can actually have a chance to win.
Thank you.
Great, thank you for that. Instant runoff voting, ranked choice voting, same thing. You'll see both of those terms, and it's something I really believe in, and we're talking about it in the film as well. So now I want to do a little informal poll. So please raise your hand if you either now or ever have voted in a swing state. Do you have any? Okay. On the panel, anybody? No, okay. Not I. All right. Is there anybody who's
Depends
voted
on
in both? Who's had that experience?
Depends
of being,
on.
All right. So.
How you define a swing state?
So Joe, you want to talk about that? How does that feel?
I was for one cycle a Virginia voter. I didn't like Virginia. There were a lot of thunderstorms. There was certainly more communication thrown at me. I felt a little bit bludgeoned. Not as bludgeoned as I've seen people be in Ohio when covering presidential elections, where it can feel like you're being assaulted by your television. The messages are so constant and door knocking and other kinds of contact. Here, the presidential election feels like it is happening in another country, honestly. We get it, we're the bank, people come in to raise money, but we don't really participate. Once in a while, our primary matters, and you get a little bit of competition there. But it's a very different thing to be a Virginia voter in one cycle. Yeah.
And I've never voted in a swing state, so it's an experience I'm sure. Yes, maybe.
So I'm from the Deep South and have spent all of my voting years casting a vote in a pretty predominantly red states. This last presidential cycle, I was in a swing state, a purple state of Florida, and it felt a lot different. I walked to the polls. I wasn't going to vote red, although I have voted red in various elections, but it just felt nice going to the polls and having my vote possibly help a person win when I voted for years knowing that I was going to cast a vote that would be ignored by everyone other than just to run up a ticker on the latest Newsline coverage.
Thank you, thank you. Yes, I can imagine that it feels pretty good. So, Christina, I want to ask you about alternative parties, third parties. With your experience working with getting third parties on the ballot, how does the Electoral College impact alternative parties in this country? I mean, clearly we have a two-party system, and it seems hard for the others to break through.
I believe that there's far better reforms out there. It did not, I feel, give the proper representation. And really, I wanted to go back a little bit to the alternative voting methods. And so at the Free and Equal Elections Foundation, though I'm a big fan of ranked choice voting, also known as instant runoff voting, there are also other forms of alternative voting methods out there, from score voting to approval voting and many, many more. So on our platform, which we're holding our 4th annual Electoral Reform Symposium in Colorado, I hope to work with the League of Women Voters out there, Fair Vote, and many more really awesome groups and doing that. But those are the sort of discussions we're going to go in really great detail. I know Lisa, I think you'll be out there for that symposium. Jen, I hope you are as well, and so on. But as far as the Electoral College, it definitely, it's another component, a big component of the system that keeps the two-party duopoly in control of our government. And that is not serving our interests whatsoever. So I think that I'm learning today of all these different methods beyond certain voting methods discussed here, but there's so many out there. But pretty much anything is better than what we have, which has resulted in the two-party stranglehold of the system. Which again, these two parties are
another biased panel. No one is pro-electoral college.
The powerful families up there. So I definitely think that though these terms might seem a little complicated at first, Jen's right, because I remember when I first started digging into it 10, 15 years ago, it was a little bit, but it starts to make sense, and it's the fact that by learning through education, what will come of that is our votes really will count. That's a beautiful thing. I mean, I think, again, the big reason people aren't voting is because, number one, we don't have the right candidates running. I mean, okay, Trump won. The good thing is people are not as apathetic anymore. It's a bit of an outside of the two-party system. It's an uncomfortable step in a certain direction. But I think we can go in a very positive one, him playing a role, but also the Ron Pauls and the Ralph Naders and the Venturas and the Kucinich and Anderson. So I'm very stoked about this panel and Lisa and everybody putting this on. And so that's my take. Thumbs down on the Electoral College. Anything's better.
Thank you. Okay, so now I want to bring this to the whole panel. I want everyone to respond. Let's talk about probably the most pressing issue that we're all thinking about just 6 months out from the election, and that is that from time to time, what's happened 5 other times in our history, possibly 6, because I've talked to historians who say that the election of 1800, John Adams probably won the popular vote, but some disagree with that, so we'll leave it at 5.
Okay.
Thank God he didn't.
That's another panel. So 5 other times
Wonder
in
why.
our history,
I'll have to ask him.
the winner of the popular vote
to ask
did
him.
not go to the White House, and obviously the last 2 were within the last 16 years.
Right,
So
that's
it's
true.
becoming more and more frequent.
No,
I
it's
talked
not.
with another expert for my documentary that I interviewed, who said, you know, as long as our elections remain close, says it's not really a problem when, you know, the vote counts are far apart. And he said for the foreseeable future, they will remain close. And so we're really likely to see this continue to happen.
I'm not sure about that.
What does the panel think about the fact that, you know, I mean, I'm sure you've all heard the arguments, which is, well, that's the race they run. I mean, they understand the Electoral College, and so the candidates run
Ed
their
Nasner's asleep.
campaigns accordingly. But what does that do for voters, and what is that? How is that for democracy? Who wants to talk about the winner losing?
I want to know what Ed thinks.
That's not true. That's just not true.
He's seen more of his elections than the rest
I
of
think
us.
I'm gonna buy her for lunch.
What do you think about these people getting elected over and over again, Ed? Two-party system.
Well, there is something to be said for seniority.
Yeah, term limits, huh? They're just kind of hanging in there over and
It's
over.
gaining strength as we go along. We'll probably have it. But I think you want to tell it one term, right?
No, I mean, is it serving the people, them getting elected over and over again, and the current voting system as well?
Well, how are we going to, is 2 terms enough? 4 terms enough? What's enough?
You have any questions?
I mean, you can ask.
Well, let's talk about the most undemocratic feature of the Electoral College, which is the candidate with the least amount of votes. The candidate who wins the majority of the popular vote doesn't take the White House. In your work, do you guys meet with people, talk with people? What are the people that you work with and talk to on a day-to-day basis say about that? How does that make them feel as voters?
So, you know, studies have shown that 70% of Americans do support a popular vote, so some form of a national popular vote. So you're seeing whether, you know, on both sides of the aisle that the system is not working right now. The challenge is how do we change that system? And you know, for those of us that are working on this issue, what we encourage is folks check out nationalpopularvote.com. It goes into state by state what's happening, and this bill has been introduced in all 50 states, and we've seen it in small states like Rhode Island, and medium states in like Washington, and then even these large states like right here in California. We've already approved it. But we're not there yet. We're 40% of the way. We need another 40% of the Electoral College votes, so that 270 to get us to a win. So the real inherent challenge is when we try and ask our elected officials to change the rules by which they got elected. So we're seeing a backlash, right? Like as far as what happened this last November, and folks may feel like, oh, we can't change it now, maybe in the future. And then on the opposing side, the other party would be like, oh, we need to change it now. So it's this weird place that we're in. And I would encourage all of you to think through and how do you want to get involved, whether or not you live here in California or potentially a swing state, and be more vocal about what's wrong and how to fix it. Because I think the real challenge is election rules, as wonky as that can be. Some folks just breathe it and think that
Is it
it's
okay
just
if I stand
there
to
and we
record?
can't touch it.
I wanna
Well,
wait.
actually,
I wanna
we
wait.
can.
I wanna
There
wait.
are rules that we can change and that we need to change and we should change.
The core problem goes around legitimacy and cohesion for the country. You know, this is a system that was put in place when there were 3 million people in this country. There are now 320 million. You know, this is not a country based on your ethnic origins. I mean, it's what the Swiss like to brag. It's the villains nation. We're a nation of an idea, and our legitimacy and cohesion is built on shared things. If you elect somebody, you know, you get this the thing that we just had. You've got a real question about legitimacy, and then if that person, you know, compare Trump's behavior with George W. Bush's behavior in their first times in office, both of who lost the popular vote, but won the presidency. Whatever you think of George W. Bush, I would argue he made efforts to sort of reach out and have the play of, well, country.
We're seeing how biased it is again.
You know, unusual, and concedes no such thing, right? His argument is this is fraudulent, that this state had millions of non-citizen voters voting against him.
It did.
If that were true, part of the problem with the Electoral College and the American system, it's not very democratic because it now disenfranchises millions of residents of our country, many of whom have been here for decades, but do not get to vote. That's more than 5 million people in our state of 39 million who, because they are not citizens of this country, do not get to vote in the place where they are. That's a sort of violation of a very basic human right.
No, it isn't.
Right, and American traditions of the consent of the governed, taxation without representation, all of those things are part of it. So it's really important that we have a system that sort of reinforces us, given the diversity of this country, the size of it, geographically, the size of it in terms of people. And the problem here is that it's a threat. And in this state, which I cover him around, there's real anger and there's real attempts to separate ourselves.
Right.
I mean, I'm not just talking about Cal exit, because I don't want to start another civil war. I don't want to march out of it, and I certainly don't want to leave country and then have a neighbor that is as violent and volatile as the United States. So
No, we're not.
but we have to sort of cohere. And I think the reason why there's so much conversation about the system is that this system is working against the very great challenges of having an American cohesive polity. It's actually one of the many contributors to this polarization of the country.
And I think what's fascinating is that it took Donald Trump getting elected for us to realize this Electoral College popular vote thing isn't really serving our interests. It has not been serving our interests for many cycles. And I would say with how Trump ran his campaign, he's probably savvy enough if it was the popular vote that counted instead of the Electoral College, that is. Probably would have changed the strategy.
Absolutely.
I think that would have happened and maybe would have still won. But I love the fact that, aside from the positive of looking at Trump getting elected, we are more engaged. We are not going back into our apathetic ways. Had Clinton got elected, right? We're getting more engaged. We're recognizing, whoa, there is this rigged system. I mean, Trump touched it. Bernie Sanders really went in on that. That was great, but he's not the first. There have been many other leaders, as I mentioned beforehand, who've addressed his issues. So for the Free and Equal Elections Foundation, Fair Vote, all the groups I can speak for ourselves, it's sort of a great thing that people are getting more involved than ever. And I can see a lot of the youth, really that 18 to 28-year-olds, are not discrediting all ages, I'm older than that, but are really looking for the solution. And that solution is going to be through education and knowledge and it being fun and exciting and like the way to be, because otherwise I don't see much of a future for the youth the way it is until and when they get involved in our elections on a local level, volunteer, even helping out in your community and talking to the people next door. That is what's going to bring about real change.
I just want to add one more thing. So although folks may feel it right now, like post this last presidential election cycle, what we've seen is over the past 200 years, according to the National Archives, more than 700 proposals have been introduced in Congress to reform or eliminate the Electoral College system. So this isn't something new. This has been hundreds of this 200 years of this has been going on. So at some point, my hope is that we'll see a change, at least in my lifetime, so that we see a better election system in place at the national level and, of course, locally as well.
Thank you. Well, I can see we've got people queued up to ask questions. This is great. I just want to also let you know that the Electoral College is not a thing. It's never been used in any other country before or since.
Right.
We are the only country that uses this system to elect our executive, and as you know, we don't use it for governors, we don't use it for any other election. So just with that in mind, we'll start on the left and take the first question.
I think we have to go back to a fundamental premise. Mr. Asner disagrees with it, and I respect that decision. We are a republic, we're not a democracy. The framers were not interested in mob rule, majority rule. Democracy is often listed as two wolves and a sheep voting over dinner. A republic ensures that the sheep has a gun. So I think that premise is missing. I feel this is not an effective panel because you don't have someone who supports the Electoral College. Yeah, absolutely. This is not a good panel. We want a real discussion. And I would like to give a voice to that very quickly because others have run a lot longer. We have an Electoral College to ensure moderate majorities. If it was a popular vote, candidates would go to New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago, and the other 7 largest populous cities. Even more states would be disenfranchised. So that's the first thing to consider. Now,
What is your question?
Okay,
I need a question.
I understand that. Now, this gentleman brings up something I had forgotten about. Maine and Nebraska, I like their system. Donald Trump actually won an electoral vote in New England, and it was in Maine. So I'd like to know, as a Californian, I would like to see a congressional apportionment system in my state because I know both candidates, major parties, would start coming here again. So what steps do we take as Californians, Democrat, Republican, whatever, to start ensuring congressional apportionment in California, just like in Maine and Nebraska? But I will finish this. Once again, this is not a good panel because you don't have a pro-electoral, excuse me, we need to, you need to start allowing that voice. You know, okay, you interrupted me, so I asked a question, and now it's your turn.
So you had your question?
Okay.
That's all you got. Does anyone want to take that? 'Cause
I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. Go ahead.
Ballot initiatives filed that didn't make the ballot, that have proposed that kind of system where you give things out by congressional district. That is essentially a system that has a lot of power in state legislatures, which draw congressional districts, and that gets you into a whole nother hornet's nest of questions about the nature of redistricting in the country. Those systems are not the greatest systems. They're systems that, when you poll on them, they're not very popular, but you could do it. I think one way you could get a better way to get California into the conversation beyond the very smart things that Jennifer and Christina talk about.
You see the bias again.
Would be to advance some sort of caucus in a piece of California to challenge Iowa and New Hampshire. I'd suggest the Central Coast.
I don't feel like my question's being answered, though. That's the only thing. That wasn't my question. It wasn't about the caucus. How do we get congressional apportionment in California? That was my question.
So two ways to do it.
Thank you.
Either get a statewide ballot measure, right? So have the people put together signatures, get it on the ballot, and then have it approved. So we change the Constitution. Secondly, get
state
a bill
constitution,
passed,
right? State constitution.
Get a bill passed through the state legislature and have the governor sign it.
How many of you would support that? I'm just wondering. How many of you would support that?
Also, like to
Sit down or you can exit, please.
I want to say that.
Okay, that's fine.
Everyone gets a question.
Okay, that's fine. I understand. Are you guys here because of me, or
You can sit down, that would be great.
are you here because of me, or? Okay.
Learning about it. So again, more education. That's what we're here about today. And this is a start. I mean, I can see Lisa bringing in people in the future to talk more on the popular vote side around and have more of that negotiation. That's just more discussion. That's the sort of thing we'll be doing at our symposium as well. So I think that's important. And I heard the people clapping the popular vote thing. So I think that's valid.
Right, and I do want everybody to have a chance to ask their question. I just want to give you this information that I have, because I do have a table, and please stop by and discuss this with us further. But the most often question I hear, or the most often stated concern is that, well,
Sorry for my understanding. Thanks for your patience.
Well,
Okay, thank you.
The cities will decide every election. So let me just give you this information. The top 7 cities have a total of 69 million, or 21% of the country. All right, the top 20 cities have a combined population of 123 million, or 37% of the population. 40% of the people live in the suburbs. I mean, you really need to study demographics to understand that it's just not correct to say that if we had a popular vote, that the top 7 cities would elect every president. That's just incorrect.
Wrong.
So, and where do you stop? Do you just start saying, well, we don't want people in the suburbs to decide, and only people living on dirt roads can decide? I mean, it just gets kind of ridiculous to my mind.
But that's what you're
let's
starting the
go with
conversation with.
question. Thank you.
Two-part question. The first one, winner take all, let's say California 55. There are some people who did not vote that way. So I wanted to learn a little bit more about that. And the actual process. Are the
I'm sorry?
electors to get together and debate
Yes, sir. Well,
before they cast their votes, or are they just supposed to vote?
no,
based
I'm not a
on,
part of the Tea Party, but I know
majority
people on it, like Gregory Britton and the rest.
Yeah. Don't you go to the meetings?
Is this a selector question?
No, I don't. I know Gregory Britton. I was there at Mark Steinworth's office.
These are state processes. I've literally, I've been to
Is it
the
for
Electoral
Kevin?
College in
Are you familiar with
Sacramento, when they gather. And then there's a vote cast there, and then there's a gathering in later in Washington, D.C. In some states there's laws, as we learned, there's laws against faithless electors who don't follow the way things went in the state. And you're voting for electors. Part of that is, having parties and campaigns pick the right people to serve as electors, people they can trust to vote for them. That was one in the disorganization of the Trump campaign. That was one of the problems they had.
Okay, next question.
You mentioned the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, and you said that 10 states had approved it so far. I know in Colorado it failed on a party line vote. The Republicans voted against it, the Democrats voted for it. Of the 10 states that have adopted it, are they all Democratic states primarily? And the other thing is that in 2020 we'll be redoing our census, and redistricting will happen in the state level. Reapportionment will happen, and so the state legislatures will change. So do you think that the National Popular Interstate Vote Compact is more likely after 2020 maybe? And then the third thing is, full disclosure, I was a presidential elector in 2016.
Well, thank you for those questions. So you see support on both sides of the aisle. Just want to give you a couple of examples. It passed the Arizona House just recently, and then the Oklahoma Senate. So you see it on both sides of the aisle, partly because we want to make sure that every vote really does meaningfully count, and despite whether or not you come from a blue state or a red state, folks feeling like, oh, I want to make sure that our state is actually a competitive state. These 4 states in the 2016 election. As far as the redistricting and census goes, that's a really good point. I mean, when we think about how the lines are drawn, one is who's doing it, and is it, like in California, we have what's called a Citizens Redistricting Commission, and that's very different from other states around the country, right? So potentially, I mean, you could see some momentum in other states where they may see a fairer election where it's more competitive, because unfortunately right now you're seeing seats that are very safe. So when every seat is really up for grabs, then potentially you could see some impact at the state level, so that these kinds of bills do pass in support of the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact.
Thank you. And your question?
When the country was founded, roughly there was one congressional representative per 20,000 individuals, which then broke down to up to every 10,000 voters. My question is, currently, the district where you're in, Pasadena, technically has a population, the representing of its Congress, of about 500,000 people.
Yeah.
Is the true failure of the American democratic system that the representation is unequal? There's about 500,000 on average per congressman in California, while in Wyoming, the entire state has 500,000 and 1 congressman and 2 senators on top of that. Is that the true failure of the Electoral College? Is it ties us to the unequal representation of congressmen and women in this country?
No, there's a lot of layers to that. I mean, when we think about how our Congress is functioning, you look at the numbers, and I would say a vast majority of Americans agree that Congress is not working. And one bill that we introduced is called the Fair Representation Act, to change the winner-take-all system, the single seat for Congress and in the House specifically, and having a multi-seat setting elected by ranked choice voting. So that bill, the Fair Representation Act, I would say Google it, not only changes the way that our House representatives are elected, but also how those lines are drawn so that they are fair, right? And that we have proportional representation really take into effect, not only for those that identify as Democrats or Republicans, but also third-party candidates, independent candidates, or no party preference, which we're seeing a lot more people in California as registering as no party preference. But to your point about the fact that, especially here in California, it's such a populous state, and Los Angeles is another great example, you see it at all levels, not just Congress, but supervisors and the city council, and you're expecting people to raise, over $1 million to run for a city council race, and representing more people than potentially a congressional seat. So I would imagine that all of us have to do our job to take part in these systems and be vocal to your electeds as well as to the media and say that this is wrong and we need to change it, and have people think more critically about how to change it.
Yeah, I think the question is right. It is, that's part of the problem with the size of the country, and you could rectify that. I've seen research that suggests that ideally you want representation in the legislative body somewhere between 10 and 50,000 people. But if my math is correct, that would give us a Congress of, if we had 50,000, that would give us a Congress of about 6,000 or 60,000. I think it's 6,000 if I'm doing the math in my head right. And that's a pretty big body. But the problem is even worse in the state Senate in California, only 40 people, and they're representing almost 1 million people now. And those are the people you're supposed to be able to talk to, right? Your state legislators, and you really can't. They can't. They could talk to people every day for 5 minutes, and it would take them, I think the number's like 20 years for state senators in California to talk to everyone in their district.
Sure.
So I'm happy to say that Richard Winger, the editor of Ballot Access News, has joined us, and we're going to let him take the next question.
Well, would you mind if I just...
Yeah.
San Francisco, half the airport runways were closed down by fog, so this is why it's late. But I'm dying to ask this question, and I'm going to get back to the Electoral College, even if we've got away from it. How many people can tell us who came in third in the Electoral College voting for president last year? No.
It was Collins or...
No.
They didn't win any electoral
College vote.
John Kasich got a vote. Ron Paul got a vote. It was a lady in Washington State, the chief.
The guy who came in third was Colin Powell. He got 3.
Oh, okay. Where were they? That's right.
7 people got votes for president. This is the most in the history of the country getting electoral votes.
Wow.
And then there's 1 each for John Kasich, Faith Spotted Eagle, Ron Paul, and Bernie Sanders. But why is this important? Here's what's important.
Sorry.
Some of the states refused to let the presidential electors cast the vote they wanted. These 7 votes for people who weren't expected, those electors got to do it. But in several other states, they were not. They were dragged off the table when they voted wrong. They said, "You're fired, you're not an elector," even though theoretically the people voted them. So they're suing. So we have 3 lawsuits going, Colorado, California, and Minnesota. And I think these electors are going to win. And if they do, we'll have established the principle that presidential electors can vote for whoever they want if the person meets the qualifications. And since I'm opposed to the Electoral College, I'm thrilled by this, because I think once the word gets out, people are going to start realizing we've got to change this thing. And I realize you were on another subject now, and I don't want to cut that off.
That's a good point.
Shut up now.
No, I'm really glad you're here and that you got to tell us about that. So next question.
Yeah, similar to the gentleman's man, right, about the abolition of the Electoral College, the reason why I'm against it is that limiting the voting system to the popular vote is effectively mob rule. For example, if I held a vote with this entire audience to meet up the panelists and take their money, and if we win that vote, as you guys suggested, it's winner take all.
Do you have a question?
Yeah.
Look at that.
So the question is,
They did the same thing to you.
What issues does this create for a national popular vote system if the winner takes all?
Nice one. Notice how they started cutting.
Take all. It's one person, one vote, which is a fundamental principle of
Exactly. So
democracy.
if we have one vote.
It's a point. One of the arguments for electoral college is it can isolate the conflict, right, to certain places. If every vote matters every place, potential problems, fraud, what have you, can become
Serious
a problem in
problems.
this place, right? You know, it sort of makes, we have state elections, we're like county elections. And there's sort of you can sort of isolate things and make them manageable. A really close national popular vote election, you know, that was, you know, sort of Florida close, would be a national disaster given the nature of Americans. I mean, I think that's a fair point, right?
Yes, it is.
But you know, is that system going to produce as many national disasters as an electoral college system?
But ours hasn't produced any.
Okay, next question.
Hello, I was just wondering.
Notice how they started cutting you off.
The winner take all for all
It's so
states.
biased.
Would that solve the problem?
It's
And
outrageous.
question two, I've heard nothing about the closed access for presidential
Nice to meet you.
debates.
Third
parties
you're from here in Pasadena or
literally
what?
out of the running. Wouldn't that
I'm from
also
Torrance,
help
California.
a lot of the goals you guys are trying to
South Bay, LA County. Yes.
May I address the
Yeah.
Commission on Presidential Debates?
No,
that,
right now. What is
strikes
it?
a chord with me.
Myself. It's just my own channel.
Leading elections.
I'm getting like the quieter, more wonky ones. I can't get into the other ones. So
Ralph Nader, independent. Chuck
yeah, I
Paul,
mean it's so flagrant, and they.
In 2012,
what I notice is like they have such an idealism of human nature, which is wrong, and that's part of the reason why there's a
Gary
problem.
Johnson, Jill Stein, Rocky Anderson, and so on. Virgil Good of the Constitution Party, and then most recently in 2016 with Mr. Ed Asner here, we co-moderated out in Colorado. We had three parties out there. Unfortunately, Gary and Jill weren't able to make it. And so what I have learned is that the Commission on Presidential Debates is run by the former chairs of the Democratic and Republican Party.
What's the
It is
question
again
issue?
a facade, it's an illusion, creating a false illusion that there's only two parties. And I bow down to the League of Women Voters for retracting this report towards the CPD in 1988 stating that it has perpetuated a fraud on the American voters. So the CPD is crumbling, the sponsors are removing
That's right,
themselves,
we win.
just like parties
There's
are
no the minority rights are
crumbling, they
gone.
really are.
That's it.
Mainstream
They
media is
I said the same thing. You know,
Hollywood, I mean, it's
two
just
wolves and a
all-
lamb.
And so the need for something
In a republic,
to rise
the lamb has a gun.
brings us all together. An independent movement is going
And the
on.
framers
It's
understood
just
this.
in the cars.
Federalist
Needed
10
more
talks
than
about
ever.
it.
So
You know,
thank
human
you for
nature is
bringing up
flawed.
the
We need to
CPD.
constrain
I
power,
will
not
check out
give it. It's just limiting it, and they don't get that. They don't get that.
That's part of the social contract in general. You don't
Yes,
have
kind of
unlimited
this
freedom. You don't have
proportional
unlimited
small party
rights.
thing.
5 or
I mean,
10%.
our last
And
direct
government
march
just
forum
kinda
was in
going like
Spain,
this and just
in the Basque Country.
Yeah.
And I watched that country over a year of preparation.
And we're going to have to fight back again.
Go from two major parties where they both split. And if you look at our two major parties,
Thank you, Vincent,
you
right?
can see them splitting in the not too distant future. The divides within them are.
Let me give you my
intense.
cards.
And they went to four parties, and they were paralyzed. They couldn't form a government. And I like proportional representation in theory. I like parliamentary systems in theory. I wish I lived in a country with those kinds of systems.
Break down your content.
But if we go to that in the process, if we go to the additional number of parties within this sort of, at a presidential level, within this sort of electoral college system, I mean, I feel like we would see chaos, you know, really dangerous chaos and conflict in that way. So I like to live with the two parties, and I actually wish those parties were stronger and not so restricted by things like campaign finance laws and other kinds of rules that try to ensure nonpartisanship. I wish they had more money and could touch us in many more ways in our lives.
What if they were all
That's a good
independents instead of parties? What's your thought? No parties, right? Independent, just an independent candidate. Because
Ruolo?
every candidate is an individual,
Ruolo.
whether they're with the party or
Got
not.
it. Okay.
It's about what they
Excellent.
stand for, who's donating
I will.
for them, if they're for the people, not for the people. So
I don't think that's right. I think we vote for
But what does that
parties.
even mean?
I mean,
Constitution
and
has
that's
no
how
limit
humans
to parties.
react. Humans connect through parties.
Yes.
The government's the best thing we've done. If you're all independents, then
Evil.
that's filled by media and internet, and you have
Finally.
have relationships through media, which is very dangerous and very polarizing. You want to
So,
have more people
this is
connected
an
to politics
example.
through connections with other human beings and actual conversation.
Right, so this is an example of whether or not you agree with a party or you don't affiliate to a party. Either way, the system is not working. So
I
like, we
disagree.
even know that. So right? So, knowing that we only have about 5 minutes left, I'd like to hear from all of the folks that are standing, just so that we make sure you hear your questions out loud. And then if we have time, we try and address all of your questions in the last 5 minutes.
So definitely I agree that education is key, and the youth of the country is making a huge wake-up call to everybody. The thing I've noticed, being a native-born Californian, and I fell off the left and right wing long time ago, though I have worked within the Democratic Party, I noticed that a lot of people think that they can move themselves into a democracy, being a young person from a young, small conservative town. This town doesn't agree with me, I'm going to move to California, Oregon, New York, whatever. And they move themselves into a place and become complacent, and that's why you see the voting numbers in Los Angeles so low. And how would we basically, and as a student, if you're somebody like that, you have to move to a town and get a driver's license and register within that state. So how do we kind of make an expatriate, since we do have a 50-state system that's based off the Electoral College? I'm personally a ranked voter supporter, but how do we kind of allow students or young people who move when they're young and usually never get the chance to vote in their local elections, just turning 18 and moving to college in another state, how do we kind of give them an expatriate?
Involved, volunteer, get local. I ran for statewide office as Secretary of State in 2010 at 27 years of age. You can do it, you can do it, and you can do it until we get out of these shares, run for office. We have the social media as a game changer. We have independent media. We have so many accountable groups rising here and many, many more. So that's the key. It's about replacing those corrupt people on a local level. I know in Canberra we have 5 people on our board, and last year Ed and I did a candidates forum, replaced one of the 5 corrupt candidates. The incumbent president was replaced by Harry Farmer, an astrologer that does planting and weeding and helps the community with love. This guy won. It can and will happen. That's where real change comes from. That's what we got to do.
So for those that are still standing, if you can give us a question like
real quick,
10 seconds.
Don't you think this is premature without electoral protection or voter integrity?
Yes.
I mean, look at Massachusetts, my God. Anywhere where there was paper ballots, Bernie won in the primary. Where it was electronic, Hillary won. I mean, come on, that happens all over this country. I mean, I think it's just kind of premature to be talking about.
Can we just hear, we want to get everybody, thank you.
Well, how do you handle the very likely scenario that is going to become an increasingly partisan issue? I mean, especially considering the fact that Republicans do have a numbers issue. The gap between the number of Republican voters and Democratic voters is increasing.
That's not true.
The fact that many Republican
Not in Pennsylvania.
if this trend continues, will feel that their voices might be heard less with the abolishment of the Electoral College system.
Right.
Thank you.
What about, you touched on swing states, what about when swing states change over time?
That's
So
right.
My home state of Georgia switched back in the 80s, or the 90s. And then personally, my exact district, the Georgia 6, we just had a huge runoff election.
Yeah.
They ran before and had 90% Republican strong. So things change over time. You can't say that swing states are set in stone.
That's right. That's right.
What's your question?
Yeah, really quick. So you mentioned that 70% of the people are in favor of some kind of popular vote. You also mentioned that there's a lot of people that aren't very informed about the Electoral College. So I think it's very intellectually honest of you to talk about, people voting for a system that
like
don't
this
even
guy.
understand what's currently in place. That, and you talk about apathetic voters, and we need ways for them to get access to vote. I don't understand why if someone can't take 10 seconds, maybe even 15 minutes, not that long, out of your day to register to vote and to drive 5 minutes away to vote. Well, why do I need to go out of my way and make sure they vote if they don't care enough to vote?
Thank you.
Hi. I was just wondering, my dream government and voting is kind of a mix between the Australian and British way that they do the electoral. In Australia, they have it so the ranking voting, which I totally support, and I took a math class on that. It actually makes the most sense. And they have it so they can only run for 6 weeks before the election, and the federal government gives them the money to campaign. And then the British government, I want to take out their percentage. They, in the Congress, the Parliament, they have, each party has the percent, and so they get to,
Okay.
but yeah, I was just wondering what you think about that.
Okay, thank you. So we have to wrap up, but if we could just have each panelist maybe answer any or all of those questions. And we'll just real briefly, we'll start with you, Christina.
Sure, I mean, the one thing that resonated, I couldn't hear the whole comment, but right here, we've got like some youth going on here. All right, Fridays, I hope you check out greenequal.org, but the register to vote, okay, we might feel a little bit, giving up hope, but man, when you give up hope, guess what happens? You're a part of the problem, and that's what the system wants. Not that you know, but don't give up. Not that you are giving up because you're here today and we're learning and all, but registering to vote is key, and I do see those candidates. If you don't like a candidate in your area, register to run for office.
Yeah.
So get out there and do it, or volunteer for one of your friends that might be running of the four of you. That's how it's going to happen. When you start running, people are going to resonate with your age bracket. 18, 20-year-olds learning, taking in information, and I'm excited to see that happen. It has to happen. That's the only future we have. It has to, it will.
Okay, thank you. Last thoughts, Ed?
No, I'm listening.
Jennifer Long Day for Ed.
And that gets an applause from me too.
It's hard to predict, but we can use data and figure out what does make sense. And for those of us that do this work on a day-to-day basis, we're providing an option, we're providing information. It is up to you all to decide ultimately, what do I believe, right? I mean, the same could be said for the mass media or independent media. And I think it's on us to be able to be actively involved in our communities, to register, to not only, and I just want to look back to like when my family immigrated this country over 40 years ago, none of them were politically active. So they still don't know what I do for a living. But what I do know is that when I turned 18, I registered my mom to vote. And every election since then, she still calls me to help her with her ballot. So there's a lot more people that we can engage and should engage. But unfortunately, there may be candidates that may not speak to them. There may be political establishments that do not speak to them. And it's on us to figure out how we can change the system so more Americans can get involved.
And just to the young gentleman here near the front who asked about why can't people go drive 5 minutes. You'd be lucky, certainly in this county, to be able to drive only 5 minutes to a polling place. We're seeing throughout the state and more broadly in a lot of parts of the country consolidations of polling places, so it's farther and harder to get to things. I also wonder about millennials saying that everyone should be able to drive, because the millennials I work with seem to not be getting licenses or driving, that it's some sort of, boomer Gen X conspiracy. So I think we're moving in a different direction to absentee and mail.
How do they know
voting,
you're millennials?
Mail ballot voting in a lot of places.
Okay, thank you. 20 seconds, Richard.
Well, I just want to speak up in favor of political parties. Political science research has shown that partisan elections have better turnout.
Right.
And in nonpartisan systems, special interests are even more advantaged than in partisan elections.
Okay. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you all being here. I hope you're enjoying Politicon.
You're from Karen. You voted for Karen? Oh, I wish I'd been there. That was the most exciting election. I was in Huntington Park, and there's that's the 5th one in a row. Democrats are getting pounded all over the country. They poured $50 million. What's your name? Josh. Nice to meet you. See, that's the other thing I'm glad you addressed it. Swing states. California was a swing state, and Michigan wasn't a swing state for 30 years, and it changed.
Wisconsin wasn't
The first governor I knew was
Pennsylvania.
And that guy's lying when he claims that Republican numbers are falling. In Pennsylvania, they've doubled, or they're increasing. It's a red state now.
Wisconsin's another example. Hillary thought that was in the bag.
And she was.
States are hard to predict. States are super hard to predict. We talk about how right now
Exactly.
Texas has 3 people coming in for California for every 1 person.
And they're voting with their feet.
And it's because of the politics. Hey, Chank, what's up? Anyway, I mean, it's just
absolutely right. You beat me to the question about why there wasn't at least one person.
This is
a different view.
I mean,
I was very disappointed.
Yeah, this is not a real discussion.
It's not what I'm for or against. I want to hear both sides.
It's supposed to be a discussion.
And even NPR covers it better when they talk about the Electoral College. I have no problem with the states having contests. I just don't like being in California where it's a given.
And the answer to that, which I asked, which was turn it, and so that way
California won't do it because it will be harmful to the Democrats.
I know, and
if they were interested in the fairness, they would do it. They're not interested in fairness. It's buyer's remorse.
Yeah.
And if Al Gore would have won his home state, he would have won the presidency.
Exactly, but he didn't. Isn't that something?
It's always buyer's remorse that we have to change the system. And mob rule is great, especially in California when Californians...
Mob who was great?
Mob rule.
Oh, yeah.
Because they voted against same-sex marriage twice. 66%
That's
Democrats voted.
And they voted
for
against
Obama.
it. And they voted.
You need one Republican, not one,
Yeah.
for gay marriage to win by a landslide.
Right.
And it lost twice.
Yes.
So go have your mob rule.
Yeah. And let the states absorb that conflict, but not the whole country. You know, and that's the other. I mean, what that young man who talked to me afterwards, like what he talked about was these progressives don't understand human nature is flawed. It's destructive if it's given absolute power. The framers understood that, and they don't. They're just looking at numbers, but they're not dealing with human nature.
Well, did I that
really
guy correctly when he said non-citizens
should be able to vote? Why don't I ask him? I want to say thank you. I know we don't agree on everything, but that Prop 2 thing, I want to get rid of that.
Yeah, more than not.
I want to. Thank you. Okay, I'll get out of here because I need to. Hey, that was a really good point you brought up. Where did Colin Powell get the 3 votes? Was it in Washington State?
All 3 were from Washington State.
Right.
I'll give you some.
But that was for vice president, wasn't it?
No,
for president. Okay.
I have it
Let me
all.
see it. I forgot about that, but you're right. Washington State, they don't punish faithless electors. But
they do. They find them.
they did find them, but they're suing over it.
No, the Washington guys dropped their lawsuit.
Oh, okay.
So it's Colorado, California, and Minnesota that's proceeding.
What I'd like to just give a response to that, which is we have political parties, as you mentioned, and what will happen though is that electors are partisan. So I'm not worried about it. They can vote for whoever they want. I trust them.
The founding fathers who wrote the Constitution thought electors would use their independent best judgment.
Sure. Well, that's part of the judgment is that they go with their party. That's fine.
And yeah,
but this is your take on it.
You can have this. See, the judge in Colorado, the district, he was really hostile. See what he said? Okay, that's all.
But thank you so much. Thanks for making it. I know it was tough.
They and the Deutsche Bank Foundation, they helped make it possible. Yeah, it's really fun.
What Deutsche Bank?
Yeah, well, they have the foundation on it. It's complicated. Everything has to. Everything's a little bit different. You have to.
So you're like a 501c3.
We are very much so. We don't have ads. We don't have to. We don't have to worry about. We don't judge ourselves on hits. It's mission.
Wow, that's really interesting. And you have kids?
I have 3 boys, 8, 6, and 3.
Awesome. Shoot.
Well, sometimes it's awesome. A lot of times it's fight night.
Boys are good.
No, I can't afford college. We're in South Pass. We're in South Pass, which is good. And the sort of Mandarin immersion. I was able to live there for a while, so maybe we'd like to do that. That's where all the people are. But please, would you give my absolute best to Caroline? I know that times are not easy, and I just want to say how much I think about her and give her a hug for me next time. Please.
She's getting involved in a lot of things herself.
Please give her my absolute best.
Oh, I will, absolutely.
I just had 2 questions. Sure. The first one is that you're
Joe, by the way.
Joe Arthur.
Nice to
Okay,
meet you.
I'm glad we have some agreement. I want congressional. That would be awesome here. Our state would get really competitive. My view.
I think in a redistricting.
I'm glad you
kind
were
of world-
honest about abolishing the Electoral College. I totally disagree with it, as you understand. My questions were, why are you glad that Jefferson won and not John Adams? That's the first one.
That's a long question.
Because it kept
basic
the
one.
country
together. I mean,
So if Adams had won again, you think
he was
everything would have...
arresting his opponents, and I take
No, he wasn't.
personally the journalist. He was arresting his opponents.
No, he
and the
wasn't.
journalists.
There was this Alien and Sedition Acts, but they were null and void.
Brutal bad guy. He was a
I disagree
bad
with
guy.
you on
Jefferson
that.
got in
but-
there, saved the republic, expanded the republic. God bless him.
It's a republic, not a democracy. You said that. Second question. Do I understand you correctly? Do you think that illegals should be able to vote?
I believe that anybody who has been here for a certain amount of time, I'd say probably at least 5 years, whether they're undocumented or
Illegal.
non-citizen, should be able to vote in at least their local elections, and that's been true. That is the radical position is that non-citizens can't vote, because most of the history of this country, non-citizens could vote everywhere. Only in the early 20th century, some of the anti-immigrant stuff of between the world wars did we lose non-citizens voting, and this is not radical. I mean, a number of cities in Maryland do it. Chicago, New York, San Francisco allow voting in school boards.
Okay, I'm aware of that, but don't you?
I don't because
I'm getting your opinion.
I don't believe in I believe democracy involves universal voting. If you are inhabiting a place where you're an inhabitant, it's your home, you should be able to vote there.
I'm just getting your opinion. Okay, I get it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
That you vote for representation. We don't vote for the electoral college. We choose who.
Yes, you do. You vote for the elector. Absolutely. And we are not a democracy. We're a republic. We are.
I just wanted to go over.
Okay. So, I just want you to know that he had compared, Ed Asner compared Nazi Germany to the United
Earlier,
States.
I saw you from home.
Yeah, so that was outrageous. Let me see if I can ask him one last time. So, Ed Asner, do you still stand by the statement that you're comparing the United States to Nazi Germany? You actually believe that?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, I gotcha.
Okay.
Got it. Mary Tyler Moore supported Trump, by the way. Oh, now he wants to come and talk to me? You can come talk to me. I'm not running, I'm sitting. He's ready.
Please, everybody out. Come on.